My knees hurt after training, but that's normal, right? That was a question that was asked to me, and essentially I had to say that that was wrong. But I can totally understand why this is a confusing thing. So what I wanted to do was just put together my thoughts as to when your body should be hurting, when it shouldn't, and why it may be hurting in times when it shouldn't be hurting. So following training, I think the first thing we need to establish is what is good pain and what is bad pain. And what I want to do is take away the word pain. And actually what I want to say is the good side of things is what we would term an ache. But when we get to an acute pain, that's where there's a problem. So following training, we all know that feeling of the body aching, movements feeling sore. And essentially this is what we often term DOMS, the delayed onset of muscle soreness. And that is now attributed to what we term the micro tear theory. So in essence, when we've trained, we've torn our muscles to a small extent. So the good thing about that is they then grow back stronger. And that's the benefits of training. That's why we do what we do. So therefore, the days following training, if we're feeling an ache or a soreness, essentially that is a good thing. But it's a very fine line to then when we can cross from these micro tears to perhaps something more significant, and that's when we get acute pain. So what I want to establish or get across is that if you're suffering that acute pain, this shouldn't be ignored and is something that you want to act upon so that you can keep training. Because what we don't want to do is stop you doing those things, stop you getting the benefits of training because of pain. But by simply resting, what you're going to be doing is not correcting the cause. So, in terms of knees hurting following training, it might be that let's talk about an activity like walking up and down the stairs following training. Now, if as you do those things, your legs ache and you feel this soreness, that would be quite normal and almost a positive effect of the training. But if you are getting sharp shooting pains running into those knees, or something that feels a lot more acute, that is something that I would look to address and correct. So why might you be getting these pains? Because this is something that also causes people confusion. People might say to me, I've been getting these pains in my knees, but I stretch and I stretch and I stretch and they don't go away. Well, that might mean that you haven't got a flexibility issue, because we can get the pain for a few reasons in the knee. It might be that we have a flexibility issue of the muscles that cross the knee. It might be that we have a strength issue in the muscles that cross the knee. Or it might be that we have a muscle tissue structure issues, and we've developed things like trigger points in the muscles that affect the knee, or there's problems within the knee itself. But we can also have a combination of these things. So what do I mean by these things? Well, flexibility. Flexibility is the amount of elasticity that the muscles have. So in the case of knee pain, we want to make sure that those muscles are as flexible as possible so that we're not putting extra pressure on the knee, or we're not pulling on the structures that cross the knee, most notably the tendons of those muscles. So, how do we improve flexibility? Well, we improve flexibility by stretching. So if you have a lack of flexibility in the muscles that cross the knee, they will contribute to knee pain. And as a result, what we want to do is stretch those muscle fibers. So if you've particularly upped your training recently, or if you've new to a certain type of training, then the muscles can become quite tight. Also though, the muscles can be too weak for the demands that they're placing upon them. So now by going to training, by exercising, you're doing the right things and you've started the process of training. But we have to remember that really this should be progressive. So if you've upped the training, if you've upped the frequency of your training, if you've done things that aren't progressive, what this may mean is it's too much demands for the current strength of your muscles. And as a result, you may develop damage in those muscle fibers that go beyond these micro tears, and they become a more significant problem. So then what we need to do is improve the quality of that tissue. And we might do that with things like massage or rolling. And what we need to also do is apply an appropriate strength training program to get those muscles to the level to go back into your full training program. I hope this is making sense so far. But both of these things can contribute to what we term trigger points or sore points in the muscle fibers. So if muscles are too tight, they can develop trigger points, and if muscles are too weak, they can also develop trigger points. So if we think about the quadricep muscles, the muscles at the front of the leg that come over the top of the knee, if these muscles develop trigger points, what that can do is then place extra force onto the tendon that crosses the front of the knee. So when you then use those muscles, this extra force is applied to that tendon and you feel that pain. So how do we develop the trigger points? Well, this can come about through a lack of flexibility or a lack of strength. But what we need to do is make sure we know what's the cause. As I say, if I come back to my earlier point about I keep stretching and stretching and stretching, which people say to me when they come into clinic, well, the problem there is that you've got full flexibility. So we've got no benefits to be had from the stretching program. But when we look at certain key strength tests, we find a weakness there. So what we want to do is not add any more stretching or spend too much more time stretching, but focus on the strength. Or it might be that they've overloaded with training, and actually what we've just done is develop a lot of trigger points, and we need to work on improving that tissue quality that crosses the knee in order to allow you to do training. So essentially, to kind of conclude, should your knees be hurting following training? Well, if it is a dull ache, then that is completely normal and in fact a good thing. It's your benefit of the training program. But if you are really suffering a acute pain as you're walking around, as you're going up and down the stairs following training, there is something that needs to be addressed. But it may not be that stretching is the answer. It may not be that strengthening is the answer. What we need to do is establish the correct cause so the correct rehabilitation can be put in place for you so that you can carry on training. Remember, rest isn't always the answer. If you just take rest, what that will then be meaning is that we're not correcting the cause. So whilst rest days are important, sustained periods of rest should only be done if we're doing what we prefer to term active recovery, and we're using that rest to perhaps modify the training to enhance your rehabilitation.